Chris Ross is a performance consultant, trainer, coach, and presenter. With 30 years of consulting experience and over 800 loyal clients, Ross brings his unique brand and expertise to help clients realize their performance organizational goals. In The One Thing, Ross will provide a mindset and skill set for managers to lead more effectively and draw the very best from their employees.
How many of you actually have to get results at work instead of just showing up? Yeah. Well, you know, in your new role as a manager, things have changed a little bit. As an individual contributor, you were just measured on the stuff you did, right? But now as a manager, you're measured on the results that you get from others, right? You have to actually get them to produce something or you don't win. Well, the Gallup organization does polling, and a recent Gallup poll tells us that the cost to American business of lost productivity is $300 billion per year from employees who are not engaged. So how do we define engagement? Really, engagement is volunteering, right? In the old days, we used to just hire someone for their back, right? You show up for 8 hours, you get paid for 8 hours. But now we want people to be engaged. We want our employees to bring their hearts, their minds, their soul, their creativity, their innovation to the game, not just show up. Well, when we look at the very top of the engagement continuum, at that very highest level, that active engagement level, I want you to think about a time when you were really turned on about a project. Couldn't wait to get to work in the morning, worked through lunch, drove home at night thinking about it. Remember that time? At that level of engagement, at that highest level of engagement, you are outproducing your coworkers by 400%. That's what we want from people, right? That next level down is engagement. Sure, they're engaged, they're happy, it's an okay place. It would be way better if we could move them up, but it's still okay. Then that line separates engagement from not engagement. Moderately disengaged. You work with some of those people, don't you? You know, they show up, they do their thing, but they get even, right? They get even. Then there are the bottom dwellers, right? That bottom 10%. You work with some of those too, don't you? Yeah. And when we ask managers and supervisors, how much time do you spend with bottom dwellers? What do you suppose the answer is? A lot, yeah, like 90%. Not a very good place to be. So the question is, for you, how many of you have employees who have more talent and enthusiasm and intellect and creativity than they're able to use in their present job? That's the key. Let's unlock that. Let me share with you a parable, if you will, the story of the geese and how geese, our friends who fly south for the winter, translates into some lessons for organizations. So as we see the geese flying, they fly in a V formation. Well, that V formation is very efficient. It allows them to fly 71% further than they would if they were flying on their own. So the lesson from that is that if we fly in formation, if we align our talents and abilities with the organization, if everybody's together, we can make it much further. Well, the second lesson from geese is that if one of them falls out of formation, they immediately hit drag. They're not able to keep up with the group, which means if individuals fall out of alignment with the group, they kind of fall behind a little bit. So we really need to tuck in and align those goals and those values and those behaviors with the organization. Another lesson from the geese is the leader. So the lead goose is flying along. They're headed towards Monterey or wherever they're going. And they cycle out. He gets tired at the front or she gets tired at the front. Goes around to the back, right? Well, the lesson for us in organizations is that everyone needs to share those tasks of leadership. Everyone has those talents and abilities, and they need to bring those to the forefront and bring them willingly. Another thing we hear as the geese are going overhead, and you may have heard this recently, is the honking. In flocks of geese, the honking is encouraging the leader to go on. what kind of honking takes place in your organizations? Is it honking of encouragement or is it honking of discouragement? We need to have encouraging honking going on. Well, the last lesson from the geese is that if a goose is sick or wounded or shot down, 2 other geese come down. And they take care of that goose until either the goose is better or dies and is able to rejoin the flock. So the lesson for us is that we need to be able to help each other in the organization, but we also need to take direction and help from others as well. The lessons of the geese. How many of you could improve your performance? Oh, good. I've asked that question of thousands of people, and I always expect a group to say, no, I'm there. Anyway, so if you could improve your performance, let me give you 6 options for improving performance. And as I go through these, I want you to think about which one would apply to me, okay? So the first option is that you had better expectations and better feedback about your job. In other words, you had more realistic expectations. You knew what was expected of you fully, okay? The second one is that you had better tools and resources to work with. The third one is that you had better consequences and incentives for doing your job. And I don't mean more money necessarily, but more feedback, more consequences for doing the right thing, right? Okay, so below the line, this 4th box is about skills and knowledge, but it's about, do you need to know skills and knowledge in order to do your job now? Not go to the next one, but in order to do your job most effectively now. The 5th box over here is capacity. And when we mean capacity, it's about, are you in the right job? So in other words, if you're an accountant in construction workers' clothing, right, you're in the wrong job. I went to engineering school, wasn't a match for me. The last box over in the corner is really you just cared more, right? You really don't give a rip about where you're at, okay? So those are the 6 choices. I want you to think about it for a second. And tell me, and what I'd like you to do is just by show of hands, you got to pick one of the 6. You must pick one. How many would put yourselves in number 1? Okay? Great. And how many of you would put yourselves in number 2? Okay, not quite as many. And for number 3. So you guys were pretty typical of how most groups vote. And as you'll notice the numbers there, about 75% of you had numbers in the top 3 boxes, and about 25% of you were in the bottom 3 boxes. Well, this comes from some work from a guy by the name of Thomas Gilbert, who wrote a book called Engineering Worthy Performance. And in his book, he talks about these 6 variables to drive performance in the organization. And he draws a line in these boxes, and the things that are above the line are really affected by the organization or the environment. The things below the line are really more affected by the individual. Well, there's some conclusions about this. So the first conclusion is that lack of performance is more often caused by organizational or environmental factors. Has that been true with your experience? Yeah. But yet we keep focusing on the individual, don't we? We keep hammering in on the individual, trying to get them to change. The third lesson, and this is the most important, is that it would actually be much easier to change the organization than the individual. Well, a couple of you are a little skeptical about that. You're going, I don't know about that. So let me try this out. How many of you have ever had a spouse, have a spouse now, or have ever dated? Okay, I want you to think about that one thing that's a little irritating about that person. And just the one thing, okay, just the one thing that's a little irritating about that person. You got that in your mind? Yeah. And how much luck have you had changing that? It's really easier to fix the organization than it is to fix the individual.